Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Negotiation Podcast. I am, of course, your host, Todd Embley, and today I am thrilled to welcome Su Cheng Harris-Simpson. Su Cheng Harris-Simpson is the founder of the Women Empowerment Council, an organization that aims to advance gender equality in business in China and beyond. She is a longtime member of the Beijing business community and AmCham China board. She has had an impressive career as an entrepreneur in Beijing as well. Sue, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Todd, for having me.
Now, as we usually do, what city are you in as we record today's episode?
I am currently in Beijing, China. Just landed back last Friday, and from 2.5 months of traveling in the U.S., and so I'm happy to be back home.
Yeah, that's a stand. Usually a lot of people take the summer. I don't know why people don't go back home for the winter. I can assume why. But yes, everybody goes back in the summer a lot of times, go see their first home or their second home, depending on which way you're going. So, well, it's really, really great to have you. Thank you very much. You have been a stalwart of the Beijing business community. But before we dive into the work that, the Women's Empowerment Council does, can you tell us just a little bit about your background and how you ended up in Beijing?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question, Todd, because this year I would have been in Beijing for 30 years. And, it's been a journey. I'm from Seattle. I was born in Taiwan, but grew up in Seattle. And basically wanted to travel and see the world, but work as well. But right out of college at the University of Washington, I went to work for Boeing. And then that was kind of a ticket, a thought that, hey, why don't I sell airplanes? That'll give me globally traveling, right? But back then, if you wanted to do that, to get into the sales and marketing department of the Boeing company, you either have to have an MBA or you are an engineer. And I wasn't going to go back for an engineering degree, but I thought, okay, MBA, I can do that. And I was afforded back then to that Boeing actually, this is a great thing. Boeing paid for my MBA and I was able to do that. But that's what brought me to China. I was able to do 1 year of independent study in Beijing. And that really opened my eyes to China. And being Chinese American, I'm just like, wow, would be a great experience. So I landed in 1995, first time, and then traveled back and forth a little bit, and then been here ever since.
All right. Well, go Huskies.
Here, yes, for sure.
Also go Seahawks.
Yes,
but then
yes.
not go Mariners because right now they're ahead of my beloved Blue Jays in a wild card spot for the playoffs, and I'm not exactly enjoying how that's playing out this year. But anyway, I digress. Now, you've worked, as you said, at some very established companies like Boeing and also UTC, or the United Technologies Corporation, but you've had such an established corporate career. What inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
Well, let me maybe go back a little bit. So once I land in Beijing, I really fell in love with the country and the city. And I worked I was hoping to kind of continue to work for Boeing in Beijing. But at that time, McDonnell Douglas was merging with Boeing, so that didn't work out very well. But what was great was because I did have 1 year of independent study in Beijing, where I worked for Hill & Knowlton. And through that, met a lot of just business community leaders, and then ended up when I came back full time, then in 97, I got a job working for the Capital Club, which is the premier business club at that time. And Who's Who's of Beijing was a member of that club. And that's how I then met Richard Latham, who was the head of UTC back then. And then I've worked for UTC for 5 years. And during this whole entire time of working, even looking back at my Boeing days, I would call myself kind of an independent contributor. a closet entrepreneur in many ways. So I basically work in project management areas, in where is a lot of business development areas and planning events and logistics, those kinds of things. And because of that, I think that really build upon the concept of being entrepreneurial. And
Mm-hmm.
I, like many women, who, when it come, I was a later, older mom, I was a more mature mom. That when we had our daughter, my husband and I had our daughter in 2002, and my husband is travels a lot, and therefore with our young baby, I really had to think about was what do I do, and so I decided that I would leave the corporate environment, and at that point was going to be a full-time mom. And but because of that time in China, which you know, Todd, is that there was a lot of growth, amazing energy that was happening here in Beijing and China. And I was, just because I was with UTC and lots of things are happening, projects are happening, the US Embassy, lots of new organizations coming into China and companies. I then was I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll try my hands out on being just a freelancer. And that's kind of how my being a closet entrepreneur basically came opened. And in 2009, I started my own company, SCHS Asia, um, Su Cheng Harris High School. That's like, lots of people go, SCHS Asia. I was hoping for SCH, but that was already taken. So SCHS Asia, where we're really a consulting company focusing on working with a lot of in industry of travel, events, uh, PR, marketing, those kinds of things. So I feel very blessed that that happened because it really then steered me in a whole new direction here in China.
Well, let's give a quick shout out to that. Where can people? Do you have a website? Is there somewhere that that people can go and check that out?
Well, the interesting thing is this: China has evolved in the 30 plus years, as you can imagine, and I about 7 years ago, I really pivoted because I felt I wanted to do more in the area of philanthropy, education, and women empowerment. And
Mm-hmm.
so I then I didn't no longer wanted to do certain projects or events kind of businesses. I wanted to pivot to something that I felt that I really that was meaningful to me and that was impactful. And so I looked, reflecting back on my career path, really looking at what I was that I felt passionate about. And women empowerment really jumped out in the forefront as I looked. Everything I did had some kind of tie to that:
Yeah.
education, women, girls, and philanthropy giving. So I then pivoted to that, and then decided to restart SCHS Asia in rebranding it to the Women Empowerment Council, which is what we are today. So we have our website, www.womenempowermentcouncil.com. So please visit.
Yeah, that's a classic entrepreneurial path, though. I mean, it's the old mantra of just start, right? You go just start and go into do something, and then on the path of doing that something, you will find your true passion and your true self, and then, like you did, you can then just pivot into that. But one typically leads into the other. But I think too many people wait for that light bulb opportunity of what they really want to do, instead of just set off down the road. Just get on your journey, and it will reveal itself upon going through that path and the ups and downs and the emotional hurdles and everything that you do. Then you're going to really find out what it is that you truly love, and then do like you did and really pivot into that. So we are going to jump into that in a minute. We're going to get into the WEC, but I first want to just quickly touch on the fact that you've been heavily involved with the American Chamber of Commerce in China. And I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your role there and what's going on at the Chamber these days.
Okay. Great question. And well, AmCham, in so many of these years, ever since the first day actually I landed, I been very involved in AmCham. And back then, I think you might have interviewed a famous person named Jane McGregor. And he was the first person I met, landed in Beijing. And back then, I was, as I mentioned, was doing my independent MBA program. I interviewed him. And from that moment on, of course, he turned me on to AmCham and never looked back. So I've been a member ever since then.
Right.
And so that's been
We've
the
had James
community.
twice, actually.
Oh, cool. Yes, he's a great friend, him and Kathy, in Duluth, Minnesota. Yeah,
Yeah.
great fun. Just, I think that's the strength of AmCham China in the sense of the community and the people. And that's how come I know I kind of grew up in this community. And back when I was working for UTC, part of my portfolio job was to work with AmCham. And AmCham advocates for American businesses doing business in China, and it made sense. And so, and I have a great leader, boss, as I mentioned, Richard Latham, who then empowered me to be a leader and encouraged me to actually run for the board. And I have to say, I was probably one of the younger back then board members, and it was an eye opening experience for me to be involved, engaged, and I really do believe, this is a good thing about American is volunteerism. We believe in that. What you put in is what you get out, and that's what I did, and met amazing, amazing people, great leaders, and learned a lot, and in many ways build a business around that. And today, it's really have changed a lot. But AmCham is steady. Colm Rafferty is current chair of AmCham. Michael Hart is the president, working hard to really try to be the bridge for the business community and the US and the Chinese government as well. Not easy
Yeah.
in the current day situation that we
Environment.
won't go into, but
Yeah.
I believe it is leadership, people on the board of AmCham. That's why I want to be involved. I want to have a say. I want to be impactful, make a difference. And I really encourage all women, men as well, but they're at the table usually, but more women to be engaged and involved and run for board seats like AmCham and other organizations because your voice is important. And having diverse, AmCham is a representative business community. That includes SMEs, that includes individuals and large corporations. And all the voices there add value. And I really believe that having diversity in voices is helps an organization make better decisions and have the growth opportunity that it's needed. So I encourage anyone who's coming to, China to look us up at AmCham and, you know, be a part. And anybody who's currently in China or Beijing to get involved.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is just one of the best communities that business people can be a part of. And if you want to, I wouldn't say shortcut success, but if you want to ease the burden of all that is expanding into China or going to China for business, that's a great way to do it. Is to learn from others who have done it before you, learn from both their successes and their mistakes, and that is one of the best communities that you could possibly get involved with out there. So commend you on that. I was going to mention too, as we were mentioning, my wife, when I lived in China, she was the manager of the AmCham Dalian office for 4 years. And I don't know if you know this, Sue, but you're talking to a former AmCham golf tournament champion right now. I actually won the tournament way back a long time as a younger, more flexible person who could swiftly swing a club. So I just thought I'd throw that out there because I know everybody really needed to know that. I kid. Okay, that's great. Thanks
I
very
just
much.
want to
Now,
interject
go ahead.
right there a little bit about AmCham. That again, this is what is so much fun if you look back, reflecting, right? I mean, that was the community. We played golf together. You know, there was
Mm-hmm.
the charity ball that I was involved in that we put together, and now
Mm-hmm.
this is my third term as on the AmCham board. So you know, it is really what you put in is what you get out. But like you said, those are the fond memories. Of being in a community when we look back.
Yeah, and we raised a lot of money. We raised a lot of money. I think we had about a 2 or 3 year fundraising plan to put in an entire heating system for a rural school in Kaifa Chu outside of Dalian. And I mean, it was really expensive. It took a few years to get it all together, but working with the AmCham and the International Club of Dalian and some things. And so yeah, this poor school, and you know how cold it can get up north there in Beijing and Dalian. This school had no heating at all, so we were able to buy and install a heating system for the entire building. So it was great. It was great, and that's just some of the stuff that AmCham does.
Right. Well, I just wanted to add that because I think it's so important when you ask about AmCham. And what I love about it is the community, right? And we, you know, we live, we work, and we derive our income from China in Beijing, especially. So I think it's, for me, it's important to give back. And that's why I've been involved with AmCham, and I started there, the the charity ball, and now it's the American Ball. And like you said, we raise a lot of money for local endeavors, you know, to support, you know, orphans, to girls and women's health, you name it. And so I feel proud to be a part of the community that way.
Yeah,
NamCham.
as you should, as you should. Something else that you should be very proud of is the WEC, the Women's Empowerment Council. I first heard about this from a friend of mine, Emily Roblin, who I met, of course, is married to another good friend of mine, Richard Robinson. Richard and Emily, if you're listening, I know you guys moved to Indonesia, but we're still angling to get you on the show because they are two amazing people. I would want, I know you shared some of the story, I think, of your personal journey to starting the WEC, right? Being a female entrepreneur, also being a mother of a daughter, right? And so, I think when that's the case, is you look at your own existence now, but you can't help it as a mother to think about what is now, if this is what I'm facing, if this is what I'm going through, how do I make the world a better place so that 20 years from now, my daughter has a better opportunity, has a better environment to exist and to grow and to flourish in than I had? And what can I do to make that come to fruition? So I just wanted to know a little bit more about the founding of the WEC that maybe you hadn't touched on before, and some of the challenges that inspired you that you encountered along the way as a female entrepreneur in China.
Thank you. Wow. I have to say, first of all, I feel very blessed. Been able to, you know, start a company and actually do well. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, about 7 years ago, we partnered with AmCham, American Chamber of Commerce, as you know, back then to work on the, it was called the Women's Empowerment Summit back then. And the reason I did that is because, just to regress a bit, um, I started the AmCham Women's Professional Committee because I felt, again, the need. And this is, wow, I want to say maybe about 15 years plus ago. And as you know, AmCham has different forums and committees and so forth. And I felt there was not a voice for women and support um, as part of the membership. So I, along with Jennifer, who was then back then working for Oshkosh, the truck company, that we went to the board and say we feel the need to establish a women professional committee. And through that, I've been involved as one of the co-chairs ever since its inception. And we started the Economy Summit as a way to bring more awareness. And so I partner on my company then, SCHS Asia partnered with AmCham to have the Women's Economy Summit. And as I was going through this one, every year we have this amazing event and lots of people come together. But the question keeps coming up, why haven't we moved the needle? I mean, we're still talking about pay gaps. We're still talking about, all the burdens, and we're still talking about, needing women in leadership positions, having on board, and having to constantly justify always, what's the return? What's the return? And I just like, gosh, we have to get beyond that conversation and we got to start actually having actionable things to move the needle. And so this is where about, I would say 7 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, when starting to ask that question, I then reached out to some of the leaders in the community, multinationals, heads of multinational, asking that question, both men and women. And they were also like, oh, yeah, why haven't we? And then when we start looking at statistics and so forth, it's like, oh, I mean, back when I was working at Boeing, it was 72 cents a dollar. Okay, men, same job, getting a dollar, and women getting paid 72 cents. Okay, fast forward many years, about 2025, we're talking about now, if you're being very generous, 82 cents. So
Mm, that's not
why?
much.
Why? And so, we all know if you look on some of the websites for some data, you have numbers like from UN that says, oh, we won't we won't get to parity for another 130 years. And sometimes some certain countries more than that. And you kind of go, for as much as, well, women were made up 50% of the population. Why is that? Why is that? And it's not like we're not capable. I mean, all the research study shows we're capable, we're ambitious, we're all of that. So I think that's why, because of those questions in my mind, and I'm a doer, I want to make things happen, I want to make the impact. I said this one off event is not going to do it. And that's where I started embarking, thinking about, talking to various leaders of companies to say, are you interested? If you're curious and want to really understand how to bridge gaps, try to make it faster. I always said, let's get on the fast train. Here in China, we're all like speedy. So what can we do? And then the seed was planted. And that's why in 2019, toward the end, I pivoted and said, okay, we're going to just start the Women's Empowerment Council. And all we're going to do is focus on that, empowering women and girls and helping to bridge gaps. And how do we do that? We bring together like-minded leaders. And then really, when you talk about empowering women or making changes, it really has to come from the top. There's just no if, buts, what about it? If you don't have leadership, top leadership, executive level, sponsorship of that initiative, programs, whatever it may be, it's not going to move. The needles are just not going to move. So I was fortunate that I was able to recruit some like-minded and very supportive companies that were on this journey together. And we started the Women's Empowerment Council with it's a membership organization. We had 3-4 companies that came together, and today, we have 13. So it's been a journey, and I have to say everybody is on a different journey. Every company, I don't believe to say, we're not here to shame or to point fingers. We're here to say, if you believe in what we're doing and if you want to make an impact and change, join us and let's work together to bridge the gap, to move the needle, and that someday this is a moot point. We don't have to talk about this anymore.
Okay. That was well said. Thank you very much. Round of applause for everything that you're doing. I loved every piece of that. I know that you are coming up on your annual conference and awards here in early September. Tell us a little bit about the history of the event and what's in store for this year.
Well, it the last few years it's been quite challenging for
COVID.
you know
Yeah.
all of us, COVID. And so but we were again very supported by the leaders and our members that we were able to have it online. But last year we were very fortunate to actually have it in person in Beijing, and over 300 plus attendees. And this year we have our conference on September 13th. And again, we will also have that evening our Women Empowerment Awards in China. So we really believe in maximizing people, our members' time and the community's time. So we make it very robust by having a conference in the afternoon and then ending with a celebration of the awards in the evening. And we invite everybody to come if you're in Beijing, and we'll have a website for you to register and everything. It's very, very exciting. We have where the topic is very on timely about family planning, and you probably know, Todd, that, it was one child policy, then to two child policy, and now we're talking about three child policies, so and beyond. And as you also know, first time, uh, last year is the first year that China has its declining uh, birth population. And with that, I do believe very strongly, yes, we need to have a growing population in order to have a growing economy and have jobs for both men and women. However, women are the one that bears the burden and brunt of having children. And so it's really important to understand why women are not, or why men and women, families are choosing not to have babies, or perhaps, as our research paper we're launching says, starting later. So what are the pain points that's causing families to choose not, or waiting, or not having children? And what we want to say is that companies, society, government, all of it needs to come together to make it easier for women to carry that extra burden. We're talking about equity here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you ask me, if when I have conversation with my husbands, and with my husband, when I was talking about having baby, or babies, I said, "Hey, you can have the baby. I'll go to work. no, no problem." But until that day, someday maybe, technology may make that happen. Don't know. But bottom line is that it's time. It's time that you will take off. You need to take off to have the baby and support and so forth. So, with that, our conference will talk about that. We'll be launching the Healthy Women, Healthy Economy report on family planning here. It's commissioned by Merck Group. And we're so excited to work with companies, lighten companies that want to really ask the why, but more important than the how, and how do we do it, how to share best practices, how to move the needles, and so forth. So that we have an amazing panel, and we're supported by UN Women, we're supported by the All China Women Federation, and then we have some amazing entrepreneurs, as you see, that are doing a lot of great work in fintech. It's amazing that we the amount of investment now that's being put into women's health, and it's about time, as I say, to focus on women's health, as we are the one that are bearing the children.
Yeah. I'm glad you went into the white paper. That was something that I wanted to talk about. Very excited for the release of that. And I think it is, if I may, I shouldn't opine too much as the host, but on this one thing, I do think it is very important that we call on the current female leaders that do exist out there and ask them to get involved. It's very important that they do. I think for a lot of young women to look up to them as leaders, to aspire to their achievements and their success, is very important. And I know that throughout history, we've seen this work well so many times. Even take go a little bit lateral from business and go into a sports where 70 years ago or 60 years ago, I think China put forth an effort to want to make basketball popular. They wanted to start to see more sports become popular. And this goes into the Yao Ming kind of background and story there. And I won't get too much into it, but there was a effort put into producing a extremely incredible basketball player that could join the NBA and dominate and become a celebrity. And when that happened, you saw millions of kids in China playing basketball. And there are basketball courts everywhere. And everybody loves it and became enthusiastic about it because they held up that Yao Ming kind of banner as the hallmark of what could be achieved. And so it became something that everybody wanted to do. And I have to ask forgiveness to anybody who finds it not okay that I make these references or draw these similarities. And I don't know if I'm doing it well or not, but I think it is just really, really important for us to kind of hail on those that have been there and are successful and are the leaders and ask them to come. And, if we want to have a generation of young women standing up and taking charge of their lives and being successful and knowing that they can have it all and that it is within the scope of reality that they can do it. And why shouldn't they? Then that's a great path forward to be able to do it. And I know that the WC is doing everything they can to promote that as well.
Yes, I can't agree with you more, Todd. Role modeling, role models, right? We all know that when we see leaders out there, we aspire to be like them. Just like you said, Yao Ming or Li Na or any, those, it's not easy, but by having that, especially even business, this is why it was so important to have more and more leaders in C-suites that are
Yeah.
women. Because when they're not there, then we don't see ourselves there. And so it's been challenging. Why it's people ask me this is why women work. I have a lot of women who work for me and so on and so forth. And it's not about why women. It's the positiveness from being diverse and inclusive of everyone. It's not about men against women or vice versa type of thing.
No.
It's about together. It takes two. When Hillary says it takes a village, it does. And why should women have to choose between work and family? Is that I believe society, I believe companies, I believe countries flourish when they're inclusive and bring in the diversity. If you have all mathematicians in one room, well, guess what? The product's not going to get sold, whatever it is. So we know those facts. And this is
Yeah.
why I say, going back from you saying role models, but importantly, companies, society, individuals, government have a role to play in that, in having all role models in every sphere, from sports to business to government. You need that in order, and television, right? I mean, in entertainment, we see, but we need more of that for sure in business and women leaders. And this is why WEC exists to help companies really build the pipeline and figure out what's causing or what's the gap, what's causing it, what's the gap, and then how do we try to mitigate those gaps. We're holistic, we're a person. It's not like one thing will fix everything. And I think that's been in many ways difficult. This is why WEC, we're holistic. We look at it from a holistic view of a human being, both men and women, the needs, and not to say, oh, do this and then the needle will change. No, you have to be able to look at, if you're looking at family planning, it has to really start quite early in the woman's career, through when they're thinking about it, through when they actually get pregnant, and even afterwards, and so forth. So there is a lot that I think all of us can do, and both men and women, and then affording all of us choices to be able to be whole and contributing people and leaders in our work, our family, our society, and so forth.
I couldn't have said it better myself, so I won't even try. That was amazing. Again, another round of applause from everybody listening or watching. That is excellent. Thank you very much for that. Last question I have for you, Sue. What are some of the most important pieces of advice that you would give to a company in China on how they can become more equitable? For example, what are some of the most impactful policy changes a company could introduce in order to become more equitable in the workplace and in China?
Wow, that's a fully loaded question. There is a lot. But I think the key point I would like to say to leaders that are, in any company is awareness. You know, why do you want um, to have a diverse workforce? And what's the value that brings? And if you believe that it should be diverse, which includes women, men, there's diversity is a whole bunch of everything. But as a leader, if that is your belief, then being aware of it, then that's the first step. And then being able to say, okay, now I'm aware. What can we do? And then holding people accountable. A lot of policies are out there, but actually implementing them and holding leaders accountable. Lots of companies have KPIs around their diversity, inclusion work and metrics and so forth. However, are we actually walking our talk? Every leader. And are the top leaders holding everybody else accountable, or themselves actually believing in it? As I always say, talk's cheap, action speaks louder. But the first thing is being aware as a leader why your company is embarking on this journey and getting everybody on board from top to bottom, especially middle management, in my opinion, because it's hard. We're all busy. We all have numbers to achieve, small companies to large companies. It's difficult, especially when economies are bad. But we
Yeah.
can't, if you believe in it, it's even more important that you hold people accountable and say, or else all the work that you've done in the past, what's it for? This is why the needle hasn't moved, is because it's always constantly shifting. Should not be the flavor of the day. It should be a part of your core values and mission to be having a diverse workforce, being inclusive. And if your goal is to have more leaders that are diverse, that look like of the population, then women is 50%.
Yeah.
It just cannot be, a struggle why we have to justify everything.
Yeah.
It should be part of your core mission. And then, awareness building to accountability to constant putting resources behind it. It's all great to talk, yeah, but when there's no money to do anything, well, it's not going to go anywhere. The needles are going to stay there, if not anything, go backwards. So I really encourage leaders to look at that. Look at themselves, first of all. I always look at myself and say, am I walking my talk? And if you really believe in it, and if you want to be a part of an impactful, because not one, there's one person can only do so much, but together we can do great things. And this is why the power of WEC is that together we will go faster, and we learn, we share, and we influence each other to make that greater impact and positive for society and for women, girls, but more importantly, as well as for men.
One of the things I'm thinking about is, as we know, unfortunately, money talks, and nowhere is that stronger than when you're looking at a company's bottom line. So we we tend to support companies now that are sustainable. In the past, that followed good CSR principles. We can impact in a way with our pocketbooks. I mean, women still do more of the spending than men do. They make more of the financial decisions on what's purchased and what's bought. And you can influence where the money flows if you're paying attention to the equality of a company. So as much as I love people paying attention to companies that are sustainable, that have green practices, that are kind of low carbon emissions, whichever you want to take, we have to make it known and have some sort of litmus for how equitable companies are and how equitable their salaries might be across the board. And then we have to support the ones that are equitable with our spending and potentially harm the ones that are not without, by not spending on them. And that is one of the ways that really we can impact. They'll notice when it starts to hit that bottom line.
Yes. I I do a lot of these, speaking at engagements at conferences or to just groups and so forth. And I remind women all the time uh, that, especially women entrepreneurs, I said, your purchasing power is huge. Not only are you making decisions on what to buy, where to buy, and from who um, with your business, but as well as your home. I have probably 95% purchasing power for my household. And I always joked about it because I said, okay, leave 5% for my husband to buy the electronics or whatever that he wants.
Golf
But
clubs.
reality is that, I make the decision, which, really the house, the cars, the education, all of that, not 100% alone, but reality at the end of the day, that's where women's, purchasing power comes in. And as an entrepreneur, for sure, 100% of the decisions. So you're right on the money, literally, when we say, where do we spend our money? And I think there are organizations out there that are trying to do that, that are education, like Reconnect, which is that supports women entrepreneurs, is based out of Washington, D.C., showcasing purchasing power and asking companies to support women entrepreneurs in actually, access to business is very important. And then we as consumers, really can look at companies that are doing good things, both in all areas, right? As you say, that would be able to help to at least bridge the gap a little bit.
Yeah, I think we need to replace the support local, the made in America, the made in China. Let's replace that all with made through equitable pay and opportunity. And we need something that we could create something like the Better Business Bureau or some sort of a stamp of approval. We need to create that, and then we could hand it to the companies. They could put it on all their socials. Let them say, hey, this is going to help you drive revenue, especially when women who are making the purchases. If you're stamped as one of those companies that has equitable pay and opportunity within your company, and that you support, female entrepreneurs and the rest, that's going to inspire people to come and want to spend more with your company when they're making a decision on who to buy from. So I think there's a lot of good that can be done. I love that you're leading this charge, and I love that you were able to be with us on the podcast today. Su Cheng Harris-Simpson, founder of the Women Empowerment Council. Thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Todd, for having me. It's been great.
All right. Again, for everybody watching us on YouTube, don't forget that we have the podcast in audio form on all your favorite podcast platforms, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. And for those listening to us on the audio version, don't forget that we do have the YouTube channel over at WPIC's YouTube channel. You can find all the episodes over there. So for me and everybody at the negotiation, and for Su Cheng Harris-Simpson, I always want to go with the Chinese pronunciation on that. We appreciate you listening or watching today, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.